Hi everyone, 3 Men and a Whiskey, and 3 days to go. 3 days to go until Christmas. 3 movies for me to do before Christmas. A trilogy of films, if you will. And that's a good thing. You know, I like trilogies. I'm well into my trilogies. And I always plan to do this particular trilogy of films leading up to Christmas in the final 3 evenings before Santa makes his big epic journey around the world. And they're not related, other than that they're all Christmas films, but they are the trilogy of films that always come to mind whenever I think about Christmas. These are the 3 Christmas movies for me. Not saying they're the best, not saying that you'll agree that they are the ones that define Christmas, but these 3 are 3 films that do for me. They absolutely do. One in particular, which I will be watching on Christmas Eve, is the film I watch every Christmas Eve because it is my Christmas tradition. But tonight, the film I will be watching is from 1984. I'm going back to the 1980s because I've missed it. I've not been in the 1980s for a few days now, and that's not good because I would like to live there forever. At least in the movie world, perhaps not in the actual 1980s, because it was a cool era for movies, right? It was the best era for movies. People of my age would probably say. And in the same way that the films I watched yesterday and the day before, you know, reeked of their era, their decade. You know, Jingle All the Way was so 90s. It was, I thought the cast of Friends were going to show up at some point. The How the Grinch Stole Christmas was just so early 2000s. Yeah, they absolutely are products of their time. But in some ways, that's a negative thing for those films. Whereas for 80s films, them being in the 80s and them being ultra 80s, for some reason, it just works. We love it, you know. And maybe it's an age thing, you know. Maybe in 20 years' time, people will look back on early noughties films with the same doughy-eyedness that I do about 80s films. But I doubt it. If I'm honest. So films set in the 80s always do it for me. I love the era. I love the silliness. I love the OTT-ness. And I love the fact that every film isn't full of pointless CGI. So what am I going to watch? I'm going to watch a classic Christmas movie from 1984. There was such a run of great Christmas movies in the 80s. It's hard to keep up. But this one was a little traditional, but a little not traditional in that the theme around it, the problems and obstacles that the families and that the townsfolk in this quaint little American town have to overcome are perhaps not your traditional Christmas problems, but it's a very traditional Christmas film. It's very Christmassy. There's a lot of snow on the ground, a lot of Christmas trees, and Christmas lights, and all the presents out there as well. And it's about a dad who wants to get a great present for his son, you know, like so many of these Christmas films. And the great present he gets is perhaps a lesson, one of the early lessons for why you shouldn't actually get pets for Christmas. You know, as we are all used to saying, dogs are not just for Christmas. Well, mogwais are just not for any occasion. So I am gonna be watching Gremlins. I love this film. I've always loved this film. It is just 1980s Americana. It just is. It's quaint little American town. It's actually the same town they filmed Back to the Future in. A year or so later, the exact same set, except this time covered in snow. And it's just an American classic. It's just one of those films I absolutely adore. It's spurned a sequel. I think a very good sequel. I know some people maybe didn't like Gremlins 2 as much, but I loved Gremlins 2. It was very silly. It had Bob Picardo in it, who is one of my fave Trek actors. So, you know, I was well into that. But the original Gremlins is an all-time Christmas classic, and and that's what I'm going to go watch. And it has a very young Corey Feldman. I don't know if it was his first major role, but he was, this is, pre Goonies, so he's only a little baby in this, and yeah, 80s nostalgia all the way. So what do I watch with? Oh, what do I watch? What do I eat? What do I drink with? A piece of 1980s real Americana. Well, there's only one thing to drink, and it is in fact a bottle of whiskey called Americana. It just felt right. I saw that. I was looking at my shelf, coming up with what to drink with each movie, what to pair with each movie, and this one jumped out for Gremlins, because Gremlins is 1980s America all the way for me. If you're from America and you lived in the 1980s, you would probably disagree. But for those of us who watch movies, this is what America was. When I first visited America, I thought this is what I was going to see. I was a little bit disappointed, if I'm honest with you. But Americana, the whiskey, it's small batch. It's bourbon whiskey. It's 6 years old, 48.4%. So, yeah, I have had some of this before. I think this might come through the Somerton Club. I'll double check. And I just looking forward to having a final dash of bourbon. This will be the last bourbon I drink before before the Advent calendar is over. The next two films do not have bourbon with them. And yeah, I think it's the right time to roll out the Americana whiskey for my Americana movie. So I'm going to go watch that and drink my whiskey and tell you about it in a bit. All right. See you soon. All right. All done with Gremlins. Great film. What can I say? Great film. So silly. So over the top. But in a good way. Whereas I think maybe Jingle All the Way was OTT and it's dated. Gremlins is OTT and it kind of hasn't dated, even though it's firmly stuck in the 1980s. The lovely picturesque town that they live in, that Marty McFly would be in only a year later, saving the clock tower, is looking at its best. Very pretty, very Christmassy. And the Gremlins are what the Gremlins are. It's a soft horror movie, if that's a thing. Yes, it technically falls into kind of horror, but it kind of isn't. It's horror comedy, and it works so perfectly for that. The Gremlins are just awesome. They are just they steal every scene they're in. Holly and I, while we were watching it, were debating the rules. We do this every time we watch it. We joke and rip apart the rules of what you must never do with a Mogwai, because they are so stupid. But I you kind of just let it go because it's a fantasy. The rules don't. Yeah, the rules are stupid, but they work for the film. It's really weird how you can watch a film from say 1984 and feel it's not dated in the same way that a film from 2000 has. And yeah, I don't know, why that is. Maybe it is the nostalgia piece, the kind of retro thing, the fact that the 80s are in, they've been in for a while. And so we're looking back at it fondly. And maybe 20 years ago we weren't, I don't know. Although I'm pretty sure 20 years ago I was going to 80s club nights. So yeah, maybe it's just one of the great decades and we just have to accept that. So yeah, Gremlins was great. I'm going to give it 11. Yes, I'm going to give it 11 Pipers piping. It's that good. It gets knocked down a little because it's not as Christmassy as some, but it's just so much fun. I just love that film so much. It's so cheesy. It's so brilliant. And the Gremlins are great. And, the Mogwai is great, Gizmo. And the little dog, there's a dog in it, and he's cute too. So, I can't remember half the actors because it's all about the Gremlins and, the dog. So there you go. And Snow White. There you go. Snow White. Gremlins love Disney. They love Disney. Is there a message there? I'm sure there is. All right, so there we go. I'm giving it 11. That's a pretty high score. And for the whiskey, the Americana, you know what? It was good. It was good. When you're rating whiskies, you do have to kind of put things into context. You know, if you're rating what was that I had yesterday, a 15-year-old Springbank, and you put it side by side with a 6-year-old small batch bourbon, they are so drastically different that there's a danger you are overly nice to one or overly unfair to another. And so what I try and do is taste it as a bourbon, taste it as, is it a good bourbon? And for me, the Americana really is. It's a really good drink. I've still got a little bit left in my glass. I poured quite a big shot, and it's my Brook-Laddie, my little Brook-Laddie glass. See? And yeah, it's good. It's super sweet, but in a good way. Sweet for Christmas. That's never a bad thing. And there's a level of complexity there. There's no spirit burn, which I'm really pleased about. I know I had a bourbon the other day, didn't I? And the Blanton's, wasn't it? And that really disappointed me. This doesn't have any of that. It's very, very, very sippable, very drinkable, and all good from my perspective. So I'm going to give it a very healthy 7 out of 10. I think that's a really good score for a bourbon. And yeah, we'll leave it there. Move on to the next one. 2 more films to go in my trilogy of final Christmas movies before the big day. And I'll see you tomorrow. All right. Cheers.